Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Talking Points. The former Minister of Finance and Attorney at Law, Ms. Karen Yunus to share. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Ketan. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
Sean, why are you looking so puzzled?
No, I'm not puzzled actually. I was now thinking, well, now we have a former Minister of Finance here once again to speak about the work of the current Minister of Finance. Oh boy,
me.
Wow, what could happen? I don't know. Let's see what fireworks could be engaged.
No fireworks. Just being fair and objective, hopefully.
Well, that's good actually, Karen. Mid-year budget review, allocations were made to the tune of, the supplementation and appropriation for fiscal 2022, $3,081,703,900. What are your thoughts on the presentation made by the Minister of Finance?
Okay, so I'll start by this because I myself had to go backwards, and I had a discussion with someone who's an economist. So I thought that I said to them, well, when they use the term mid-year review, it's really shorthand for speaking about the supplementary appropriation, but that is not correct. It's two things you're doing in the mid-year review. You're doing a supplementary appropriation, which I'll explain as former minister, and you're doing a mid-year review. They go hand in hand. Why is that? Because when our fiscal year, that is the government's fiscal year, usually starts in September. You can go as far as October, but it usually starts in September. And the circulars go out to the different ministries around April for them to see what their needs are. Obviously, they're not all going to be met. And so you meet with the individual ministries, their permanent secretaries, their technical staff, who all have budget requests. And many times, one of the considerations you look at, of course, is the strategic plan for the government. Is that a major, given the pie is a finite pie, what are your priorities for that year or ongoing year? Because you are required by law to go to the parliament and let the parliament and the people know how their money has been spent. Doesn't mean that the highway is finished in one fiscal year. So that's one of the things you will have to do, and they have to justify their position. Now, what we have always done, at least when I was there, and my understanding, the other government ministry, administrations of which I am a part at that time and before, is that we always took what you call a conservative position, and that really came from your technical staff. A whole floor above me was just your technical staff advising on revenue and therefore also what your expenditure was. And we fixed our revenue based on information that they would have gleaned, and we would always take a conservative position. Why? Because you don't know what is going to happen during the year. So it is better to go low so that at the mid-year review, the supplementary appropriation, you can tell the ministry, listen, right now, this is the position. But if things turn out to be better and our revenue position is better, we could supplement the appropriation to your ministry because things have taken the upside. So you generally take a conservative position, less than what the World Bank, whoever is saying what the prices are. And so that's why it's called a supplementary appropriation. But it's also called a mid-year review. So you're doing two things. You're supplementing appropriations to various ministries, which you think, whatever reason, should be given that additional appropriation of funds from the consolidated fund, which is where all monies go, except from the HSF and Infrastructural Development Fund. And then you give a review of the economy mid-year. And what was very telling, because I went back and looked back, I said, let me look back and see what we have done in the past. And in every single occasion that I looked back, you would get a mid-year review, which meant you would look at where the government had reached in relation to whatever projects, plans, etc. You would get a review of that. It's two different things. And what had happened this year, and which is why a lot of the chambers complained and a lot of the manufacturing associations complained, was that all he seemed to have focused on was VAT, the VAT issue, but not really, what most importantly, giving no figures, no production figures, no price figures, for the most important thing for our economy still is energy. And just on that point, I do think, to his credit, I think he did listen. I hope he listened because he calls in all these different associations. And they did recommend, I read it in the papers, that they recommended in giving back the VAT returns, which I think is in the vicinity of $4 billion, and only 1.6 billion has been paid back. But I can be corrected on that, but I believe that's the position. What they recommended is that the small and medium enterprises be first in line. And they say because they're the ones that are most cash strapped. They're the ones whose businesses are closing down, and they're the ones having to let go staff. So if you want to build the economy, create the sustainable development, let's give them priority. So you would note that the minister did say that the first call will be anyone whose VAT return is $250,000 or less. Mm-hmm. And that is the thinking behind it. Very solid, good thinking, in my view. And then he said, then we're dealing with VAT. Well, with those in a better position. But they did complain about that. But what was very noteworthy, and what I think all the chambers and manufacturing sectors complained about, and rightfully so, which is what a mid-year review is supposed to do, we are an energy economy. We depend on the petrochemical industry. We depend on LNG. We depend on all those things. And he was silent on that. Mm-hmm.
But he did give some overall figures with regards, and in some cases, I think he gave a definite figure on what the revenue shortfall was, and then what it's expected to be coming up. And in both cases, it ended up being $1 billion. But I can't remember with regards to what specifics, and he obviously he did not go into a lot of the nitty-gritties with oil production and so forth and so forth, as well as future.
And what he did, which I have to point out too, and it's, you might call it, Minister, I'm going to be careful what I say, but I'll just try to say, it appears to one to be a sleight of hand. And I am not the author of that statement. Well, he didn't make a pronunciation on it, but he did leave it as a question. And that is, between 2020 and 2021, that is the minister, withdrew the equivalent of 6 billion TT from the Heritage and Civilization Fund. The sixth withdrawal, now you have to look at the HSF Act and the purpose of the HSF Act. And the Act is to deal with certain situations. One of them is contagion, emergent situations, because there's a heritage component and a stabilization component. It's very clear. What he did with the sixth withdrawal was he put it into the consolidated fund. I don't know if you noted that he said, boasted, maybe that's his style. You notice I didn't go to the HSF. I did not go to the HSF. Any shortfall of 3.8 billion, so you know you're getting a deficit budget. You know you're going to be a big deficit budget, right? Which is probably why you didn't want to give too much detail. 3.8 billion, we are borrowing, but we are not taking it out of the HSF. It's the consolidated fund and external borrowing. Yes, you are taking it out of the HSF because you put money from the HSF, which I don't think the legislation is very clear. You can take up to 1.25 billion in a year, but it's very clear the circumstances under which you do that. You don't take it to put it in the consolidated fund. And what the author of that article, I mean, I think I can call his name because he signed off on it, Anthony Wilson, said, has the HSF become part of the government's fiscal planning? Because you're using it as a fiscal tool, right? So I don't think people recognize that when he boasted that way about his taking out the consolidated fund, that he had taken money out of the HSF on the sixth occasion and put it in there. So when he's saying he's not going to the HSF, he is going to the HSF, but by a rather what is this? Not circumlocution, very circumspect. No, not a direct route, you know?
Yes.
So it's not, it's another word, but anyhow, that escapes me now.
Yeah, I think the word I was thinking of was not the correct word either.
I know.
But I will know it starts with circum.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Circum in it.
Karen, I wanted to ask you, given what you were suggesting, that usually you take a conservative approach, when you were in your time as Minister of Finance, a conservative approach was the best practice, put it that way, even with estimates given from the IMF and the World Bank. Given how Colm over the last 7 years has presented budgets and mid-year budget reviews and even spoken of the economy. And given that he's been very selective in what he is relating to the public, even with the IMF report, he was extremely selective in what he was stating. And he has always been very picky as to what he wants to highlight from the report and share with the public. Did we expect otherwise? I've not often heard of him speaking.
And when you say not otherwise, you mean by?
Did you expect him to take a conservative approach?
Well, a realistic one is a better word to use, because when I was in government, I was not the creator. The wheel wasn't invented by me. It was explained to me why we took that position, to give us wiggle room so that when the mid-year review came and you wanted to make supplementary appropriations, hopefully taking that conservative approach would have allowed the revenue to have increased during that period of time for you to be able to tell a ministry, look, we can't give you more than this now, but let's see how it turns out with these supplementary, how it turns out in these 6 months. And I want to say in regard to that, he pitched the price of oil at $92.50. Now, it is true, you have to remember, we don't go by an annual year. We go by a fiscal year. Mm-hmm. So our fiscal year is from September of 2022 to September 2023. So what's going on in the annual year, you can look at what's going on there, because it's going to assist your technocrats and yourself in determining what would be a reasonable price for oil and gas. And oil had reached 116 in June, July, but it went on a downward trajectory. I don't know if that's not an oxymoron, but by the time he delivered the budget in September, oil prices had dropped about $89. And it wasn't a blip in anything, it was going down so how could you possibly, and one of the reasons they say is because he didn't want to put money in the HSF. Because once the price is 10% over what your revenue budget is, you have to put at least 60% of that additional revenue into the HSF, and it doesn't come out. Well, it came out, and he got it out. And similarly with gas, the trends were showing, whilst gas had reached $7 and $8, it was on a downward trajectory. And all the geopolitics, which I know we have to take a break now, would have indicated to the minister that there was nothing to support his very optimistic view. Talk about World Bank and everybody, when every indication was that prices were on the downward trend, and it did, and that's exactly what happened.
The Minister of Finance has touted, our economy has more or less recovered from COVID-19, and we're doing well. And if I may, not his direct quote, but just based off of what he stood up and said, we're doing exceptionally well. So, I mean, is he using that as a justification then for not even letting us know, okay, you know what, this is what we're going to invest in, this is how we're going to generate revenue. Don't worry about that. We have enough money to spend here.
Well, my hopefully short answer to that is he must be doing so exceptionally well that he has to, apart from what he had expended based on his revenue predictions, which have all turned out not to be correct, because he said that natural gas, which is what we are, a natural gas country, the production is, the Prime Minister said it, we would have 2.8, we're lucky if we reach 2.8, and what we needed is 4.1 billion cubic feet a day. So maybe he knows something I don't know, and maybe that's why he wanted to go and get 3.8 billion to supplement his revenue expenditure, because we're doing so well. So I'm not going to go by what he says, because he's gotten it wrong every single time on revenue, expenditure, deficit, and growth. And so, but I have to say, in fairness to him, but this is only in fairness to him, as the minister and as part of the government, you certainly don't want to be Debbie Downer, because what you want, the key to any economy is confidence. So we need to have confidence. Whether we could have confidence in him, given the many times that he has given information that has not only been incorrect, but has been incorrect in a way that it is not positive towards the country. So he's lost a lot of, Minister, don't be offended, it's not personal, but you lost a lot of credibility. That's the best way I'll say it.
I'll follow up on that after the news break. But
I was just going to say, thank God he's not doing engineering anymore, because if we use
You had
his,
to pay a lot of money the other day, you know that?
if we use his
For
calculation,
Grenada.
I know if we
Uh-huh.
use his calculations to build anything else again, then
No, but you know what? In the stadium in Grenada with NH,
Yep.
and they had all that money holding back. You know, in the end of the day, Privy Council say he had to pay the money.
yep.
just a quick observation, Karen. Your
By
point
the
about the lack of natural gas production. Government seems to be trying
Please.
to compensate with renewables, and perhaps
Uh-huh.
this is Stuart Young's trip right now to the US. It could be because they're trying to compensate with regards to our energy
Glad you
production.
mentioned
But
that. Just let me just say this. I know, okay, because you're not going to be here tomorrow.
okay, but it's your topic next.
Yeah, but I have to say this because Ketan is laughing. No, because this is important. Maduro, I read it yesterday. Whilst Maduro is continuing with the oil and selling oil, his attention has now been turned to natural gas. His attention has been turned to supplying Eni in Italy and Repsol in Spain with natural gas. Now, apart from all the developments that we are aware of, what that is saying to Trinidad, which was dependent, and by the way, the IMF report, the central bank report, without using the word dragon field, all their projections have been based on increased production, which has to be coming from the dragon field, because the Lauren Manatee will not give you the gas until about 2028. And as Kevin Ramnarai, Colibri, De Novo Zanduli, Cassia C, and there's another one. All of them, Matapal,
Yeah.
all of them give you no more than 400 million, 250 to 400 million. That is nowhere near. And our problem is that is why when you looked at the growth from the central bank, they said that the manufacturing sector, which would include things like, I think, ammonia and stuff like that, had grown by 10.5%. But you know what energy are they? Negative 2.5. So you have to figure to yourself, if the price of natural gas, which is what we really depend on, was so high, it means the production was not there.
RIC, I'm saying it, I know people didn't like it when I said it the first time, but I feel RIC does want to raise your rates. That's all part of compensating for the future reality.